of the issue of la'na, we find that there is a debate which is definitely happening at the moment within the school of Ahlulbayt, where certain people come forward and state, should la'na be part of the school, should it not? We reply by stating, first and foremost, la'na is part of the language of the Holy Qur'an, and therefore is part of the language of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there are many verses in the Qur'an where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word la'na. Sometimes translate the word la'na with the word curse, for example. When the Arabic language, the word curse is sab. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah 6, verse 108. وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Abuse, cursing is not part of the language, nor part of the dictionary of any decent human being. As in, all of us may have been guilty of once in a while coming out with a curse, but you feel sad when you've said it. You feel a sense of guilt that you as a human being shouldn't be using this type of language, and you certainly should not be using it against any human being, let alone figures who are respected by other ideologies. La'na, however, is a form of a supplication where you ask Allah to withdraw His mercy from certain individuals. You find in the Qur'an, for example, chapter 33, verse 56, going on to 57, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, those who hurt God and His Prophet, la'na is sent on them in this world and the hereafter. That means a dua withdrawing mercy from them is sent on them in this world and in the hereafter. You find that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam and Prophet Isa alayhi salam in chapter 5 of the Qur'an, we are told that they used to send a la'na on the people of the children of Israel. You find in the Qur'an the event of Mubahala, chapter 3, verse 61, that there is a la'na sent on the liars. So we find in the Qur'an many times that this idea of a dua where you ask Allah to withdraw His mercy, or Allah withdrawing His mercy, is something which is repeated on many occasions without a shadow of doubt. You find the Prophet ﷺ himself, before he passes away, he asks his companions to go with the army of Usama. And he says that whoever turns back from that army, la'na is sent on him. You have to read a dua where Allah withdraws His mercy from such an individual. So on many occasions we find in the Qur'an and in the Hadith, la'na is part and parcel of what? It's a dissociation from people who have sought to fight the message of God, known as tabarra. And so you find that within certain supplications we recite this la'na. But you have to bear in mind two things. Number one, if I don't respect a certain figure in history, but somebody else does, I don't come and say la'na in front of those people. Number one, common sense. Number two, morals. Those people respect that individual. I'm sitting with that individual and I'm sitting with those people, and I come and I start slandering someone or start saying la'na, that's not akhlaq of a follower of Ahlulbayt at all. Number two, be careful that the person you're sending la'na on, be careful that your behavior isn't like theirs.
Absolutely.
There are certain people who you send la'na on, like today, there are people who send a la'na, which means that they read a dua, Ya Allah, withdraw your mercy from Yazid because of his atrocious crimes which he performed at Karbala or Mecca or Medina. And you look at them and they are reading this la'na on Yazid. And for example, Yazid was a person who used to indulge in the listening of music. They listen to music regularly, or a type of music which takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what's the difference between you and Yazid? When you're doing a la'na, the idea is that I will never be like the person. Ya Allah, withdraw your mercy from them. But then Allah may end up withdrawing His mercy from you. You may do a la'na on a figure like Shimr ibn al-Jawshan or Hajjaj bin Yusuf al-Thaqafi, because they were people who used to, let's say, engage in illegitimate business transactions. But if you're in illegitimate business transactions, then the la'na bounces back at you. So it's very important for us to understand that this idea of dissociation is vital. We have to constantly ask Allah to withdraw His mercy from those who oppose the message of Islam, so to make sure that we don't have a character like this. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, when he says religion is no more than love and hate, someone asks, how can religion be no more than love and hate? We say, if you love truth, you hate falsehood. If you love justice, you hate injustice. If you love the message of Islam, you hate those who try to destroy the message. And a method of showing this hatred is by saying, Ya Allah, withdraw your mercy from these people. But there is a time and there is a place for every expression.
As Shia respond, and what's the best way to deal with that, from our perspective purely?
Well, you find, unfortunately, in any school of Islam, you have certain people who are extremes. And the most important thing as Muslims is we don't generalize. Because we saw someone who's an extreme, we don't say all that school is like that person. Today, if I saw a certain, let's say, terrorist group perform an action, and they belong to a certain school of Islam, do I say the whole of that school is like them? No. Likewise, if someone today dresses in the garb of religion, and has a foul mouth towards the wife of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa alih, and has a foul mouth towards the companions of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa alih, then that person, however much religious garb he is dressing in, is not anyone to do with us. And this is an important point that has to be stressed upon.
We have another caller. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for talking to me, and salams to both of you.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
Quick questions. Thank you very much, Brother Ammar, for this wonderful end line that you've said about not abusing anybody, really. Thank you very much for that. Quick questions, really. This year we celebrated 3 different Eids on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Is this part of the Jafari fiqh, when our Sunni brothers are coming to unite together between the Maliki, the Salafi, and whatever? They are uniting, but we obviously are more and more dividing between ourselves. So is this part and parcel of the Jafari fiqh, number 1? Question number 2 is that we claim that we believe in the justice of God. But at the same time, we have these ideas and these rulings that if a child is born illegitimate, then that child cannot become a pesh imam, cannot become a marja, cannot even enter paradise, because the hadith says that a person who's illegitimate will never become a lover of the Ahlul-Bayt. So how do you reconcile this? How do you deal with this? Because I've seen ulama coming on TV telling us that no, this is right, and justifying all these things, but completely contradictory to the Qur'an. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. With regards to the first question about the Eids, I think that's more of a fiqh question, and I think it's more aimed at the Maraja. Obviously, within the school of AHLULBAYT and within the school of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I'm perfectly sure that there is nothing which would state that we should have 3 separate Eids or such a thing. But as you mentioned, brother, it is an issue.
Well, when we look at the first area, the brother said our brothers in other schools in Islam are aiming to unite, whereas we are aiming to disunite. I think if the brother actually goes to study the jurisprudence of the 4 other schools, you'll find that in Salah alone there are 200 differences. So if anyone needs to work on uniting, then it's the other 4 schools of jurisprudence. Of course, at the end of the day, someone will say that difference is a blessing. Some have come forward with such a narration. But for those from our school to come forward and say that we don't have an aim of uniting, on the contrary, and the other schools do have an aim, if you were to read the jurisprudence of the other schools, you'll find that there are many, many, many differences on what are quite simple areas. For example, even a difference like on how you pray. Like there are some who may pray with their hands folded here, others who lower it, others who pray by their sides, and they are from the other 4 schools. So there needs to be a bit of work which is done in terms of the others. In terms of our own school, there is never an aim from any of our grand scholars to disunite. But what there is that there is a particular science towards studying narratives, and you put that in conjunction with scientific rulings in terms of astronomy, you may find that some reach their conclusions different than others. There are some who, for example, look at certain narratives and classify them as being good, and others who look at certain narratives and classify them as being strong. There are others who want to adopt the modern scientific equipment and analysis in every which way possible. There are others who believe that no, the texts encourage that these things should not be used in every which way possible, but that the naked eye should be applied. Is the intention of the person when he's looking at the narratives, is his intention that, you know what, I can't wait to disunite this ummah? If that's his intention, then you find that he's putting something on his shoulders on the Day of Judgment, which I'm sure he doesn't want to. The intention of the Maraja within the school of Ahlul-Bayt isn't that when we formulate a ruling, we want to disunite our people. On the contrary, even today, if I went to a conference, for example, and when I went to that conference, the conference is the developments in techniques when it comes towards surgery of the heart. There's one doctor who's telling me that this is the way you should be looking at surgery of the heart. There is another one. When I sit in that conference, do I look at them and say, I bet their aim is really to disunite all of us today? That's their aim, I'm sure. No. Their aim is to look at the texts, to look at the discussions and the journal articles and try and reach a conclusion which is best suited for all of us. And that is the sincere aim of the scholars who lead this particular school. In terms of the second area,
I think the question was regarding the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and illegitimate children. Obviously, there are some narrations which deal with this issue.
In terms of that issue, what you find is that, number one, these statements about illegitimate children or the children of adultery, these statements have a context, without a doubt. As in, you can't just take any hadith and say that because this hadith was said here, it applies to all time. No, some have a context. There were certain personalities, be it who fought Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, or fought Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam at Karbala, who, if you were to ask them, who was your dad, they may give you 6 different names. When they give you 6 different names, it gives you an indication that they themselves did not know who their fathers were. Even why go far? As in, there was a man by the name of Ziyad, son of his dad. Imagine someone comes to you today and says, Isa, what's your name? You're like, I'm Isa, son of my dad. So what do you mean, son of your dad? Because the fact is, everybody knew what the mother's profession was, and everybody also knew what the mother had got up to with Abu Sufyan, for example. So you find that there were certain personalities who were born from adultery. And there may be a hadith which says that person will never love Ahlul-Bayt in a particular context. Years later, we may have certain personalities who are born from an illegitimate relationship. But what do you find? You find that they are lovers of Ahlul-Bayt. And sometimes lovers more than me and you will ever be. It wasn't their fault what happened between their parents. They came into this world. It wasn't their decision that I'm born from this. So what you find is that those narrations have a certain context. But in the school of Ahlul-Bayt, a person, if he's born, for example, from this particular type of relationship, that person can reach a level higher than me and you can ever reach. And that is that he can become a mujtahid in the school of Ahlul-Bayt. A mujtahid means what? Means he doesn't have to imitate anyone. He himself becomes his own lawyer, and he doesn't need to follow the rulings of anyone. He himself can derive law for himself. So we have to be careful when we discuss these things. That on the first level, these narratives have a context, and that has to be understood. And on the second level, a highest position, higher than anything. Someone mentioned, for example, the Pesh Imam, and that will go into different jurisprudential rulings. Pesh Imam can never become someone who's as near as a mujtahid. A mujtahid's legacy, he's a scholar, and the ink of the scholar is greater than the blood of the martyr. And there is no ruling whatsoever which will come and block a person who's come from that relation from coming a mujtahid.
And there are 2 issues here as well. The first one is that I've read somewhere very recently that the context of illegitimate children was only in the context of Islamic marriages. So you may have somebody who's converted to the school of Ahlul-Bayt alayhi salam, but because they didn't live in that environment whereby their parents may have even understood it to be a sin against Allah, that it doesn't apply.
Even someone who has converted from another school in Islam, the nikah of that religion is still accepted in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The nikah of that religion is accepted in the eyes of Allah.
No, but my question is that if their parents had committed adultery and their parents weren't in the religion of Islam, then the argument is that because their parents didn't know they were committing a sin against Allah, they did it out of ignorance, that there's scope for that person not to fall under this ruling. Because some people, unfortunately, in our communities have used this maybe to make our revert brothers and sisters feel like outsiders. And this is where this confusion may arise.
Sure. No, as I said, with many of our convert or revert brothers, the ones who have come towards the school and their parents were, for example, involved in Christian marriages, that's the nikah before the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's accepted. Those who may have come from those types of relationships, that will not hinder them from reaching the highest of positions.
Absolutely. I believe we had another caller. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother.
Salam to both of my brothers, Sayyid Ammar and you yourself, Brother Isa.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Sayyid Ammar, I hope you recognize me. I'm Hassanain speaking.
Hassanain, which Hassanain? It narrows it down to about 10,000.
You met me. We met recently on the protest.
Yes, mashallah, yes.
How are you, Sayyid?
Go ahead, brother.
I had a question, which any carer of Islam can't help but to, this just comes into his mind. The question was, everyone speaks of unity, every sect of Islam, well, except for an odd few, everyone thinks of unity.